Krishna Hare Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare
Jai Shri Krishna Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiv Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiv Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda excuse me. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Din Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopi Kante Radha Kante Namostute Tapta Kanchan Gorangi Radhe Vrindaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaya Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jai Mudhire Lucy Radhe Govind Bhagwan ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam. Jai. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Sachin. Jyoti, Hare Krishna. Soham, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for joining. All right, so Srimad Bhagavatam, हम लोग श्लोक 27 पढ़ रहे थे कल. And as we know, इस chapter में, chapter 26, Kapil Muni is explaining about the fundamental nature of the material world. Yeah. So what is the fundamentals of material nature? How the material nature is created and how does it work? Yeah. So far, yesterday we read that from the false ego of goodness, that is ahankar, another transformation takes place. Yeah. And from this evolves the mind, which is man, whose thoughts and reflections give rise to desire. Yeah. As we all know, from mind, we keep thinking, what do we need? All that, right? The thoughts and reflections. And just to recap before that, so we know, right? Like, so Supreme Lord has the internal energy, spiritual energy, and the external energy, right? And the external energy comes out as a kal, time. And before that, we had those 24 elements. Yeah. And if you remember, 24 elements, Panch Tattva, which we all know by now, right? Prithvi, Akash, Vayu, Jal, Agni. Those are 5 Sthul Tattva. They are known as gross elements, Sthul Tattva. Yeah. And then we have the 5 subtle elements, Suksham Tattva, which are, like the way to remember that is from Akash, sound was generated, right? So sound is one Suksham element. Then from sound, you have Vayu. So Vayu say is the touch, the sparsh. So you got sound and then sparsh from the Vayu. And then after the Vayu, you had Agni. And Agni say you have color or the form, yeah, the shape. So that is the third subtle element. And then you have Jal. Jal say taste, yeah, so Swad. So that's a taste. And then you have Prithvi, who says Sugandha. So those are the 5 Suksham elements. You got the 5 gross elements and 5 subtle elements, yeah, which are sound, sparsh, taste, and Sugandha and form, yeah. Then we have the 5 Gyanendriya. Yeah, so out of those 24 elements, we have 5 Gyanendriya. And if you know Gyanendriya, they are like, how do you smell, right? So the nose, how do you see from the eyes? How do you hear from the ears? How do you taste from the tongue, right? And you feel the touch, right? So those are the 5 Gyanendriya. And then you have 5 Karmendriya, like how we walk, the evacuation and all ejaculation and all that, right? So those are the 20 elements. And then we have the 4 internal senses. Yeah, so out of those 24, then you have 4 internal senses. What are those four internal senses? Remember the four internal senses, right? The three Suksham Sharir, we know that, right? What are those three elements of Suksham Sharir? Man, yeah, you know that, right? Man, Buddhi, Ahankar, yeah, mind, ego, and self-ego, mind, and intelligence. So those are the three, and then the contaminated consciousness is the fourth element. So those are the 24 elements, right? So those four are called the internal senses: the mind, intelligence, and self-ego, yeah, and the chit consciousness are the internal senses. So those are the 24, and then Kal, which is time, which is the external expansion of Supreme Lord Himself. When they get merged and through the Mahat Tattva, they form from the internal energy of the Lord, it forms the cosmic manifestation. So this cosmic manifestation is known as Hiranyamya. If you remember, the cosmic manifestation is known as Hiranyam. And then when that happens, you know, there's a darkness, and Mahat Tattva, if you read about the Mahat Tattva, which is from the marginal energy, the Lord, Mahat Tattva, where all the living entities, all of us, eternal living entities are residing, Mahat Tattva eats up the darkness. Yeah. And then the expansion of the Supreme Lord takes place in the four forms. And if you remember Vasudeva, and what are the other three? Do you remember? That Vasudeva, who has the super soul, right? The super soul is the owner of the super soul. Yeah. And then after that, you have Ahankar. Yeah. False ego of goodness. And that false ego of goodness is the Swami कौन है? अहंकार का goodness से जो अहंकार होता है starting में, उसका Swami is Sankarshan. Yeah. So Sankarshan Bhagwan. And then we have Aniruddha, who is the owner of mind, because mind, it says that from this evolves the mind, which is Man, and Man comes from the false ego of goodness. Yeah. So Ahankar say you get Man, and the owner of Man is Aniruddha. Yeah. And then we have intelligence, which we will read afterward. So intelligence, the owner of the Swami of intelligence is Pradyuman. Yeah. So there are four expansions there: Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, and Pradyuman. Yeah. So I just wanted to summarize. This is what Kapil Muni is explaining, how these are the fundamentals of material nature, how this Prakriti has come. And before the Prakriti come, those 24 elements are also known as Pradhan. So if you remember, so known as Pradhan. Yeah. So now we are talking about the mind. From the false ego of goodness, Ahankar, another transformation takes place. And from this evolves the mind, Man, whose thoughts and reflections give rise to desire. That we all of us know, right? That we know the characteristics of Man. But let's just read this quickly, paragraph, Tarun.
The symptoms of the mind are determination and rejection, which are due to different kinds of desires. We desire that which is favorable to our sense gratification, and we reject that which is not favorable to sense gratification. The material mind is not fixed, but the very same mind can be fixed when engaged in the activities of Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, as long as the mind is on the material platform, it is hovering, and all this rejection and acceptance is asat, temporary. It is stated that he whose mind is not fixed in Krishna consciousness must hover between acceptance and rejection. However advanced a man is in academic qualifications, as long as he is not fixed in Krishna consciousness, he will simply accept and reject and will never be able to fix his mind on a particular subject matter. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, so the bottom line is we need to fix our consciousness onto the Krishna consciousness. Yeah, but Kapil Muni is explaining how the mind has evolved. Okay, so let's read the next shlok. Anilji.
यद्विद्वयर्निरुद्धाख्यं ऋषिकाणामधीश्वरम् Shardendivarashyamam Sanradhyam Yogi Shaneh. The mind of the living entity is known by the name of Lord Anirudh, the supreme ruler of the senses. He possesses a bluish black form resembling a lotus flower growing in the autumn. He is found slowly by the yogis. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so Kapil Muni mind को describe कर रहे हैं अभी, and it says mind of the living entity is known by the Lord Aniruddha. Yeah, self ego ahankar by Lord Sankarshan. From Sankarshan, the ego you're getting mind is by Lord Aniruddha. It says here Aniruddha Akhyam. And how is Lord Aniruddha described? Right? Rishi ka naam Yudhishvara. So he is the Ishwar of senses. He is the supreme ruler of the senses. Yeah, Rishikesh. And he is also described as bluish black form resembling a lotus flower. Yeah, Sharde Indivar Shamam. That's how Lord Aniruddha is described. He controls the mind and he is found slowly by the yogi. He says yogi biha shaneha, like the yogis who do tapasya and meditation and all that, who controls the mind, the man, they, after tapasya, they meditate on Lord Aniruddha. Yeah. And then again, it's a nice purport, Soham. So read that.
The system of yogi entails controlling the mind, and the lord of the mind is Anirudh. It is stated that Anirudh is four-handed with Sudarshan, Chakra, conch shell, club, and lotus flower. There are 24 forms of Vishnu, each differently named. Among these 24 names, 24 forms, Sankarsana, Anirudh, Pradyumna, and Vasudev are depicted very nicely in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Who had started that Anirudh is worshipped by yogis. Meditation upon prescribed this verse should be fixed upon the form of Anirudh. By meditating on Anirudh, one can become free from the aggregation of acceptance and rejection. When one mind's fixed upon Anirudh, you gradually becomes God realized. He approaches the pure status of Krishna consciousness, which is the ultimate goal of yoga. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. So the important part is when one's mind is fixed upon Aniruddha, right? Man. One gradually becomes God realized. He approaches the pure status of Krishna consciousness. From the material consciousness, approaches the Krishna consciousness, and that should be the ultimate goal of yoga, right? Not the goal of yoga is to become powerful and do all those gimmicks and all that games, right? The goal of yoga is to get to the pure status of Krishna consciousness. Sachin?
तैचे सात्तु विकुर्वाणाद् बुद्धित्वम भूत्सति द्रव्य स्फुरण विज्ञानमिन्द्रिय विज्ञान इंद्रियाणाम manugruha. By transformation of this false ego in passion, intelligence takes birth. O virtuous lady, the functions of intelligence are to help in ascertaining the nature of objects when they come into view, and to help the senses. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Then Sachin. So now, last shlok we read how the mind gets evolved, right? Man. And we saw that man gets evolved from the false ego in goodness. Yeah. Last shlok we saw false ego in goodness, mind is evolved, and Lord Anirudh is the Lord of mind. Now what it is saying is from the false ego in passion, in Rajogun, right? False ego in passion, that's when intelligence takes birth. Yeah. Now Buddhi, say here, Buddhi Tattvam Utsati. So Buddhi Tattva is arising from the Ahankar in Rajogun. And then, of course, Lord Kapil Muni is saying that the functions of intelligence are to help in ascertaining the nature of objects when they come to you and help the senses. So all our Gyanendriyas, right? The intelligence, when we sense something, we eat something, we sense whatever, that is what is done by the Gyanendriya. Yeah, which is the function of intelligence. Good. And who is the Lord of intelligence? Like Lord Vasudev is Lord of Super Soul. He is the Supreme. Right? Then Lord Sankarshan is Lord of self-ego, Ahankar. Self-ego in goodness generates mind. And the Lord of mind is Aniruddha. Yeah, we saw that. And then now the intelligence, the Lord of intelligence is Pradyuman. Yeah. It's good to know. It's good to know that, right? And what is important part is that how should we use the intelligence is what is being described here. Right, Neetu?
Intelligence is the discriminating power to understand an object, and it helps the senses make choices. Therefore, intelligence is supposed to be master of the senses. The perfection of intelligence is attained when one becomes fixed in the activities of Krishna consciousness. By the proper use of intelligence, one's consciousness is expanded, and the ultimate expansion of consciousness is Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So ultimate goal and all the elements which we have, right? Suksham Sharir and Sthul Sharir and all our Gyanendriya and Karmendriya and all that. End of the day, it says that our consciousness should get towards Krishna consciousness. That's how we can get out of this material nature and get back to the spiritual nature. Yeah. Jyoti?
Samshayota viparyaso nishayaha smrtireva cha swapa ityachate buddhir lakshanam vruttataha vrutak. Doubt, misapprehension, correct apprehension, memory and sleep as determined by their different functions are said to be the distinct characteristics of intelligence. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So of course, we all know that all these characteristics of intelligence, buddhi, you know, and again, you know, they are very nice purports. So I think we need to read those to understand it properly. Okay. So read this, Ajay.
Sure. As described in the Patanjali Yoga system, Paramana Viparya Vikalp Nidra Smritya. By intelligence, only one can understand things as they are. By intelligence, only one can understand whether or not he is the body. The study to determine whether one's identity is spiritual or material begins in doubt. When one is able to analyze this, his actual position, the final identification with the body is detected. Hare Krishna.
The false identification with the body is detected. When the intelligence gets towards Krishna consciousness, then we know that our identity is really spiritual and not really material, is what is being mentioned. Yeah, Mayur?
This is Viparasya. When false identification is detected, then real identification can be understood. Real understanding is described here as Nishchaya, or proved experimental knowledge. This experimental knowledge can be achieved when one has understood the false knowledge. By experimental or proved knowledge, one can understand that he is not the body but spirit soul. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Just read this, Soham.
Soham slept where?
Acha, okay, Neetu aap padh do.
Smriti means memory. and swapa means sleep. Sleep is also necessary to keep the intelligence in working order. If there is no sleep, the brain cannot work nicely. In Bhagavad Gita, it is specially mentioned that person who regulate eating, sleeping, and other necessities of the body in the proper proportion becomes very successful in the yoga process. These are some of the aspects of the analytical study of intelligence as described in both the Patanjali yoga system and the Sankhya philosophy system of Kapila Deva in Srimad Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so all these things are described in more detail. And I think you must have heard about the Patanjali yoga system, which is what everyone follows, right? And then what we are reading is the Sankhya philosophy from the Kapil Dev in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. So, Ravi?
तेजसानेन्द्रियाणेव क्रिया ज्ञान विभागशः प्राणस्य हि क्रिया शक्तिर्बुद्धिर्विज्ञान शक्तिता. Egoism is the mode of passion, produces two kinds of senses, the senses of acquiring knowledge and the senses of action. The senses of action depends on the vital energy, and the senses for acquiring knowledge depends on the intelligence. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So the last shlok we had, egoism in the mode of passion generates intelligence. Yeah, that's what we read in last shlok. It's also saying that egoism, ahankar, in the mode of passion produces two kinds of senses, which is acquiring knowledge, which is jnanendriya, yeah, and the senses of action, karmendriya. Yeah, so those are also generated through the mode of passion. Yeah. And in long purport, read. Jyoti?
Persons infatuated by material consciousness are very intelligent in discovering things for material comforts, but they have no access to understanding the spirit, soul, and spiritual life. Therefore, if anyone wants to advance in spiritual life, he has to come back to the platform of purified desire, the purified desire for devotional service. As stated in the Narada Pancharatra, engagement in the service of the Lord when the senses are purified in Krishna consciousness is called pure devotion. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Engagement in the service of the Lord when the senses are purified in Krishna consciousness by chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, right, is called pure devotion. Okay, let's do one more shlok. Sachin.
तामसाच्च विकुर्वाणां भगवद्वीर्य चोदितात् शब्दमात्रं भूत स्थानं भाव श्रोत्रं तु शब्दगम्. When egoism in ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested. And from sound comes the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So as we saw, the sound is manifested in the ether, right? The Akash. And again, it's a long purport, but it's pretty nice to read. At least let's just read this much. Tarun?
It appears from this verse that all the objects of sense gratification are the products of egoism in ignorance. It is understood from this verse that by agitation of the element of egoism in ignorance, the first thing produced was sound, which is the subtle form of ether. It is stated also in the Vedanta Sutra that sound is the origin of all objects of material position, and that by sound one can also dissolve this material existence. Anavriti here, sabdat, means liberation by sound. The entire material manifestation began from sound, and sound can also end material entanglement. if it has a particular potency. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, and it says there is sound in the spiritual world also. Yeah, that's how the spiritual life begins. So that's how the sound is so important. Yeah. So the first sound comes from the ether. I think we are going to pause here. So we have 2.5 minutes. And because it's Nityananda Jayanti, as we know, it was Nityananda Jayanti on Monday. Yeah. We are going to continue to see the celebration in Mayapur. Yeah, for next 2 minutes. And we'll see you tomorrow at 9:20. Okay. So at this point, if you're on video, then I think that picture is also taken. So, if possible, you can show up on the video and I can take this. Let me bring up the. Okay, so we'll see that Nityananda Trayodasi. I will see you tomorrow. Okay. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Jai Jai Govinda, Jai Jai Govinda, Govinda Jai Jai Govinda, Govinda Gopala, Jai Jai Govinda, Govinda Gopala, Jai Jai Govinda, Govinda Gopala. Giridhari Gopinath, Giridhari, aha, Giridhari Gopinath, Nanda Gula. Giridhari Gopinath Nanda Dulala. Jai Jai Govinda, Jai Jai Govinda, Govinda Gopala. Jai Govinda, Govinda Gopala. Jai Jai Govinda, Govinda Gopala. Jai Govinda, Govinda Gopala. Govinda Jai Jai Gopala, Jai Jai Govinda, Jai Jai Gopala, Jai Govinda, Jai Jai Gopala, Jai Jai Govinda, Jai Jai Gopala, Jai Jai Hari Govinda, Jai Jai